Welcome all of you today. Thanks for joining us for Friends of the Arava Institute's September Zoom mini class. I'm Rachel Calico. I'm the Acting Executive Director of Friends of the Arava Institute, and thrilled to see all of you here. I think most everyone is muted, but if your microphone isn't, I just ask that you mute it. After Tali's presentation, she will take questions and you can just put those into the chat, and she'll be able to respond to those after her presentation. Just quickly, for those of you who might be new to the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies, wanted to just give 2 lines. We are a leading environmental academic and research institute located in the south of Israel that advances cross-border environmental cooperation in the face of political conflict. Through research centers, transboundary cooperative efforts, and a university accredited program, the Institute's educating the next generation of environmental leaders, implementing cutting-edge research and on-the-ground projects which improve people's lives, such as what you're going to hear about in just a couple of minutes. The Arava Institute is a leader in regional cooperation, building bridges with researchers and leaders in Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and increasingly throughout the North Africa and Gulf states region, to address these environmental challenges and mitigate the impact of climate change. Friends of the Arava Institute in the United States supports the efforts of the Arava Institute, recruits students for the university's academic program, and brings you programs such as this and in person when we can to learn more about the work of the Arava Institute. Today, we're going to hear about Agrivoltaics, a farming system which enables land to be used for both solar power generation and agriculture simultaneously. It addresses the challenge of limited arable land exacerbated by the growing impact of climate change. As temperatures increase, technologies such as AgriPV, as it's called, offer solutions to help farming communities remain rooted, so to speak, by providing systems which support continued agriculture in their region and address the energy challenges. In Israel, an area with a great deal of sun and very limited land, agrivoltaic farming can support those who are at risk of having to leave their land because of the impact of climate change, and support the need for energy. The Arava Institute, working with the Dead Sea and Arava Science Center, led by Dr. Tali Zohar, is the only organization in Israel piloting this system right now. Once successful, AgriPV farming, as it's known, may be life-changing for farmers in the Negev, the Jordan Valley, North Africa, and beyond. It is scalable and replicable, making it very attractive to these farmers. Under Tali Zohar, she's evaluating, and she'll talk to you about this, the effectiveness of the system, both in terms of energy generation and in terms of crop development. And now I want to introduce Tali, who is the expert. Dr. Tali Zohar became director of the Arava Institute's Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation earlier this year, succeeding Dr. Tarek Abu Hamid, who is now the Institute's executive director. Dr. Zohar was a lead organizer of a recent conference on cross-border perspectives, energy, poverty, and climate change in the Middle East, held earlier this year in Eilat, which drew participation from stakeholders throughout the region. She has been pursuing this research. She is also on the faculty at the Institute. She holds a BA in behavioral science from the Rupin Academic Center, an MA in energy policy and management from the University of Haifa, and a PhD in energy policy, studying the transition towards a low-carbon electricity market in Israel. Her research explores the water-energy food nexus, the assimilation of low-carbon technologies and sustainable local solutions for water scarcity and clean energy production. And the class she's currently teaching is Alternative Energy Science at the Arava Institute. And with that, I'm pleased to turn this over to Dr. Tali Zohar. You're muted. You have to unmute.
Yeah, every time. It's amazing. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm very excited. I must say that even though I talk a lot about agrivoltaics, I'm joining a lot of Zoom and doing a lot of lectures. I'm very excited, and I'm very excited to see so many people that joined us. So good evening from Israel and good evening from the Arava. And Thank you, Rachel, for all the nice words. And I think I'll share my screen and we'll get going. Great. So here we are. We're going to talk today about harvesting the sun twice, as Rachel mentioned. And this is a problem all over the world, and we will see it in a minute. The fact that we need to use the land for multiple functions. This is where we're at. And if you will look at the global projections towards 2050, you'll see that we will need more food, we will need more water to irrigate our crops, to produce agriculture yield. We need to feed a lot of people. We need to use more fresh water. We will need more energy to support our life by 50% more by 2035, which is basically tomorrow. Add to that climate change, all kinds of climatic events that we see all around the world, and also, of course, in the United States, whether if it's fires, whether if it's more severe storms, floods, droughts. So we need to start preparing ourselves to mitigate and to adapt to climate change and the climate change events. So in a perfect world, every aspect of our basic needs, which is energy, food, and water, will have its own land. We'll have land for food, and land for water, and land to produce energy. But in the real life, it's not like that. And land is coming less and less available because we have more people. We need to produce more food. We need to produce more energy. Less water is actually a scarce resource in more and more regions around the world. And we have to learn how to use the land that we have for multiple functions. Now, until today, each of these aspects has its own, I would say, discipline. People learned and study energy, people learned and study water, and learned and study agriculture. But we see that all these aspects, they're all joined together. We need energy for desalination, for desalinate water. We need energy so we can also pump water to irrigate our crops. We need water to irrigate our crops, and we need agriculture also if we want to use biomass to produce fuel. So everything is tied together, and we need to have a holistic approach if we want to tackle all these challenges that I addressed really, really briefly. And when we're talking about also in the developed countries, but developing countries that has no access to infrastructure, we need to bring them, I would say, I call it the full package. We need to bring them the energy and the water and the food at the same, I would say, at the same box, at the same facility, at the same time, on the same land. So this is where, when we're talking about dual use, this is where it comes to it. And I have a really nice video, which I really hope I can share with you. Is everyone seeing Curtis? Can you tell me?
Yes, we can all.
Oh,
yes, we
great.
can see. Just hit play.
So when we're talking about dual use, this is it. Okay, so what we want really is to have the opportunity to have livestock and energy at the same location, the same land. We want to be able to use the land for grazing and for producing energy, or use the land for agriculture, if it's for growing crops, and produce energy. So what we're actually doing is, if until now we had to choose. We needed to choose if we want to use the land to produce energy or to produce food. What is more important? It's almost impossible question to ask. So now we're saying we don't need to choose. Let's try to combine things together, and let's even assume that we can actually benefit. The reason that it sounds so out of the ordinary is because we know that crops needs to have sun so they can do photosynthesis, so they can grow. So the thought of shading them almost makes no sense. But we just talked about climate change, and we talked about the fact that it's getting hotter and hotter, and that we have less and less water. So we are assuming that crops could actually benefit from the shade because it's quite hot. So we all need a nice noon break in the shade. We're also assuming that if there is shade, then maybe we will have less evaporation, which means that we can use less water for irrigation. So we can actually reduce the amount of water that we're using. It is definitely necessary for arid regions, but it is necessary around the world today because water scarcity is all over. As I said, we might see that some crops are actually enjoying the shade and we can increase biomass. We might see that the fact that there is a nice cool microclimate beneath the panels can actually increase their efficiency, because we know that when it's really hot, solar panels produce less electricity. So if we can create this cooler climate, cooler air underneath, we can actually reduce the temperature of the panels and we can increase their efficiency and increase the production in very, very hot days. And the most important thing that until now it's not really been tested is the fact that can we grow shade intolerant crops in the shade? We know today that all grains, which is corn, wheat, etc., which is the most important ingredient in people's nutrition diet, they used to grow only in full sun. But we know that we can see that from 2030, we will have less and less productivity from these crops because of climate change and because the temperatures are increasing. So if we can see that we can actually grow corn and wheat in the shade and actually have more biomass, have more food during the years because they're growing in the shade, even though they're not used to it, then we can provide food security, especially for areas that actually rely on this kind of crops. So we're getting to here to the Arava because we talked in general, but now the main important thing, and as Rachel mentioned, currently now in Israel, we have the first pilot. There's a lot of hype around agrivoltaic in Israel today. Commercial companies are interested, the government is interested, everyone is quite pressuring to do agrivoltaic, but there are not yet, because of regulations and because of bureaucratic challenges, there are no pilots and there are no facilities yet that actually using the land twice, but we do. And we have a nice and small facility that you can see here in the picture that is located in Yotvata in the agriculture R&D farm, the Southern Arava R&D. And we are partnering with the Dead Sea and the Arava Science Center, the Arava Institute, and the University of Arizona. We've been funded so far by the Jewish National Fund, USA Jewish National Fund. And we're all researching this topic once to provide the Arava like advanced solution and innovation at first, and also as a solution for developing countries, especially in Africa, that, as I said, need a one-box solution, one solution that fits all: energy, water, and agriculture, and crops, that it's not hard to maintain, it is not hard to comprehend, it doesn't require a lot of maintenance, it's quite simple, but it gives a lot. And so just to have like a general info, we finished building about a year, almost a year and a half ago. This is 100 square meters plot that is shaded. We also have control. If you can see my arrow, so this is underneath the panels. This is where we have the shaded plot, and we're also growing here, so we can have a control in the sun, so we can compare. We grew so far lettuce and radish, tomatoes, green onions, corn, and wheat, and we're planting in 2 weeks spinach and kale. And we're planning to build a second pergola by the end, I hope so, of 2022. So we can make, we will have more shade, so we can have greater statistical results. But this is the scientific part. I brought some pictures for you to see the idea of agrivoltaics, because it doesn't necessarily have to be like this high elevated pergola that you saw in the picture that we have now. It actually promotes a lot of technological and inspiring solutions, such as the one that you see here. And this is a great place for livestock to graze. And vertical systems. You can see here, and it's really interesting. This is sort of you see the spacing between the panels. So this is a rice field in Japan, and what it makes sure actually is that each part of the field would get sun and get shade pretty much during the day. So you're not harming a specific side of the field or a specific part of the crops. Here you can see some transparent panels. You can see it from here. It's quite interesting, and it's also a very nice technology. And you can see that there's also projects like this, pilot projects in Europe, but also in more rural areas and more developed areas, such as developing areas such as Chile. And this is, I would go briefly on our results, because I think this is the most interesting part, because we built this thing. There's a lot of enthusiastic around it. So at first we finished building at May 2021. At the Arava, we are harvesting in June, and we're letting the soil rest for about a month or a month and a half. We call it Clean Arava. It's a sanitation period where all farmers in the region in Central Arava and Southern Arava must harvest, and we're not planting. 1, because it's too hot, and 2, because we're actually, instead of continuing to have pest controls and chemicals spread all around, this is a sanitation period. So we had to go quick because we didn't have enough time, and we were supposed to harvest in June. So we planted radish and lettuce that we know that are small. They don't need a longer growing period. Okay, they have a short-term period of growth. And what we've seen is we don't have any difference. We didn't find any differences between the sun radish and the shade radish, but we did saw that even though the lettuce in the shade had a better start and she looked nicer, she did not reach full maturity, unlike the ones growing in the sun. And that's actually telling us that the shade can also have other benefits, such as prolonged seasons of growth. So then when it's actually the end of the season for a certain crop, a farmer could still bring to the market fresh product and earn more money. It has a higher economic value. We might learn that we can actually switch seasons. If we have certain crops that grow during the winter, we can grow them maybe in the summer, because in the shade it still can perform well. And mainly it allowed us to establish some measurements protocols, to install equipment, and to get used to the fact that we need to have a lot of questions and less answers. So we need to focus on what's matter. And then season 2 came, and I said, okay, now I want to try something else. I want to create more shade in one pergola and 50% cover, I would say, of shade in the second pergola, and one control plot, and to see what happens to the same crops when we start playing with the shade. So you can see here that the major differences between the beds. So we grew tomatoes, butternut squash, and green onions. So this is all taken on the same day at the same time, and you can see how the plants react to the shade and the plants that are growing in the sun. So you can see the tomatoes are really, really small and sad. It was a very, very harsh heat wave in the beginning when we just planted. So this is also tell us, as I said, when we're talking about climate change and we're talking about the severe increase in temperature, that are crops that will actually benefit from the shade, even though they are full sun crops. Today, this type of tomato were only grown in full sun. And now I have another thing to say, that you can see here the size of the leaves in the butternut squash. So we don't eat the leaves of the butternut squash, but in Africa they do. But this is tell us something about leafy plants, like basil, like cilantro, like crops that we actually eat the leaves themselves. If they need to reach out to the light, and by that they're actually increasing the size of the leaves, okay, the facial part of the leaf, that it means that we will have more biomass, which means that we will have more product, we will have more food. So again, this brings us to the fact that we have crops that will actually benefit from the shade, and we will have more yield at the end, and we will have more food. And this is a question to the audience. So this is the first harvest that we had of the tomatoes. And I want people to try and guess which box is from each plot. You can open your microphone. The brave ones that wants to try and guess.
We have it set so they can't unmute themselves actually. So, but they can put their guesses in the chat and we can see what they think.
Okay. So let's see if anyone is writing something in the chat. I will open my chat. Anyone wants to take a guess? Of this full sun. Yeah. Sunshade 50-50. Okay. Now it's full sun, middle 50. Okay, you guys are really great students. Yeah. So thank you very much for all of you that participate in my survey, and most of you are right. So the left one, the left picture is the full sun. The middle one is 50% PV cover, and the right one is 100% PV cover. So you can see that even though we have more tomatoes in the 50-50, the bigger tomatoes were actually from the 100% cover. But yes, as you saw in the beginning, they had really, really slow start, the tomatoes in the sun, and it actually impact significantly at the end when we harvest all the tomatoes. And you can see it right here, that we had most of the tomatoes in the 50% cover, and really with a really slight differences. The full cover, the same with the green onions. You don't see it the butternut squash because unfortunately, even though she was amazing, it did not pollinate very well, so we did not have any fruits. But you can also see interesting here that we saw major differences in the soil temperature between the sun and the shade. So you can see that in the onions, the blue line is actually the onions in the sun, and the other two lines are the onions in the shade. And you can see there's in some days there were actually a major difference of 4 to 5 for almost 4 to 5 Celsius, which is a lot. And it also tells us about the cooler climate that we discussed. And we also saw, we don't have it here because this is just initial results, but we also saw differences in the moisture of the soil, how moist the soil is. So this can also tell us that we, in the next phases, we can actually use less water for irrigation. And then the third year came, and the third season came, and I had to try growing grains. So we grew corn and we grew wheat. We did 50% of each pergola. We did not play with the shading anymore. I saw a question, and I will just say, even though questions are in the end, that the angle is fixed. We're not playing with the angles. This is not a tracking system. All the panels are facing south, and they're around 30 degrees because this is the best angle for the maximum production of electricity in the region. So they're facing south, and this is our trail of growing grains. And you can see something very interesting here. And this is why we're actually building a second pergola, because this is the entire plot of the corn. And you can see that these first rows are actually getting the sun from here. If you can see my arrow, okay? Because the angle of the sun, these rows are getting more sun, more light than the ones in the back. So you can see that even in the same plot, we have differences in the growing phases, which tells us that, again, we can prolong the growth, the growing season of the same of a crop. So if these plants were ready or were flowering before these ones, we actually see that they're not even ready to flower. And we were very excited. It was very interesting, and we were really hoping to see what will become out of the corn. And then that happens. So this tells us that nature knows no borders. And we came one day to the field, and we found this apparently a pack of foxes or jackals. We don't really know. We think they came for water and stay for the sweets, because it was a sweet corn. And you can see how they ate all the seeds of the corn entirely, and actually damage all the plot. But in the sun, they didn't touch a single corn in the shaded plot because it was not ready. So they ate only the corn in the sun. But unfortunately, it messes with the scientific trial, and we had no way to measure if we had more biomass in the sun and in the shade. And I hope I'm still on time. So we have this facility in Yotvata, and we're now preparing to grow spinach and kale. But I also wanted to have, and it's very important for me, to have another site at the Arava Institute, because I think students should have the experience to have hands-on projects and to see for themselves, and not only by presentations and not only by tours like a field trip, but actually physically do research in the field. So the Off-Grid Park, if you're familiar with, and if not, we can talk a little bit about it in the end if we have time, is under my responsibility as the director of CRIP. And I decided that we're going to make it more and more feasible for students. So we build a preliminary setting for Agrivoltaic. We put 3 panels, closed panels, which we're going to grow spinach, also spinach underneath. And we're going to have, will be the shaded bed, and we will have here the control in full sun. Moving on, we'll also connect the panels. In the irrigation, we'll actually work on the electricity produced by the panels. And we have a fantastic intern that I think her parents are also in this session right now. Her name is Sophie, and she's going to do all the testing and measurements and data in her internship semester. And we're quite excited. It's also a great cooperation between CREEC and CSA department, which is the Center for Sustainable Agriculture of the Arava Institute. And this is great because, again, it brings us to how holistic things should look like. We should engage in agriculture and energy and water all together at the same research, and we should join forces and to innovate and to advance science and to advance our students and let them, and I would say enjoy, because for me it's an enjoyment, to enjoy and to be more interdisciplinary, which is very important. So this is it. This is quite new. The semester just got started. If we will have another session in a few weeks, you can actually see everything is ready with the dripping irrigation and planting and following all measurements that some of them we discussed just now. And the main idea for me, when in both settings, in Yotvata and in the Arava Institute, is to build an off-grid agrivoltaic setting, because the way I see it, this is what the world needs. One, for areas, we have more than 1 billion people that are not connected to electricity and to water infrastructure at all in developing countries. And if we need to wait for infrastructure to arrive, then they continue, I would say, like our ancestors said, but they continue to sit in the dark. And we don't want them to sit in the dark. We want them to have the proper and basic needs, which is electricity in schools and in pharmacies, and to have medicines, and to have drinking water, and to have proper diet. And for this, we need to go off-grid, which means that we're not connected to the national grid, but we have this setting that can provide energy for irrigation, for desalination, for purifying water, for light, for cooling storage, which is almost the main criteria today in developing countries, because once they harvest, they have nowhere to store the crops and everything is dying. So once they get to the market, all these products are worth half. So they're earning almost no money. They need to have proper post-harvest facilities. And it's important, obviously, also for livestock. And this setting is going to be in Yotvata and also in the Arava Institute, because when we're also looking not only to Africa, we're looking also at our neighbors in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Jordan, in Egypt. And this is also relevant for developed countries, because, and this is for another session, but because we want to be decentralized. We want region to produce and to consume their own energy, their own electricity. We don't want to transfer electricity from the Arava to Haifa. So everything will have to go more microgrid, more regionally, that we can actually produce this electricity and use it in the same spot. So this is when we're talking about the bigger picture and to be more holistic. This is it for me. This is a very interesting topic. There are so many questions, so many questions we haven't answered yet, and I'm very excited, and I hope you are excited too. And I think this is it, and I hope
thanks, Tali. Yeah, thank you. That was great. It's wonderful. I've heard Tali talk about this a couple of different times on a couple of different occasions, and each time I'm learning something new, and she has more information to share. So it's really wonderful. She mentioned the off-grid village. I think there are a lot of questions, so I don't want to go too much, but if you are able to visit the Arava Institute, it is a place on the Institute's grounds where some of the technologies and research that is being conducted is being modeled, and people can visit and get a tour, whether it's around biogas or on this and other technologies. So it's to see these technologies that off-grid, right, that aren't part of the electrical grid, and modeling as we're looking at what alternative structures we can utilize around the world. And some of these are now being introduced around the world as well. So thanks. And it's also exciting for me because we have a number, you mentioned the institutions you partner with, and we have a number of donors in this country who are very excited about this project and have generously been supporting it. So it's wonderful to be able to share this. There are a lot of questions, so I'm going to share. So one of the first questions we got is from Ifat. Could you please elaborate on whether you are using chemicals or not in this research?
So we're using, we are currently growing in the agriculture R&D farm, which mainly does research on commercial agriculture. So that means that they are using pesticides, whether it's chemical, but of course, everything is authorized. We do add fertilizers. It's already in the water when we're irrigating. So yes, we are using chemicals, but this is like commercial farming looks like. This is not permaculture. It's meant to have a commercial impact. We are hoping that in our small scale Arava Institute setting, we don't have to use pesticides like this.
Great. Is the energy that's being generated stored in batteries or is it going back into the local electrical grid or something else?
Okay, so this is an off-grid setting, as I said. We have batteries. We're just now connecting, I didn't say it, but we're just now connecting our pergola at the one in Yotvata. So we have batteries because once you go off grid, you have to have some kind of batteries because you need to have all this energy run through a battery, which actually manage the frequency. And that can actually be diverted to electricity that that we can use, and we are now connecting a community-sized desalination facility, which will run on this electricity. All the irrigation is going to work on the electricity that we're producing from this pergola, and we're hoping to have a sort of cooling storage demonstration as well, so we can actually show this holistic solution, which is energy, food, and water in the same plot or in the same place. So yes,
That's
it has
right.
batteries.
Does the shade affect pollination?
No, it's not. It does not affect the pollination. The problem with the pollination is actually pollination is bees. We have beehives almost in every agriculture farm in Israel has a few beehives actually. And the problem was that we thought that the beehive is close enough, but it wasn't. And this is why the butternut squash did not pollinate, but it's not because of the shade. Actually, I would say it's interesting because we actually saw that we have less wheat because in the shade and in the sun, because birds had more fun to eat in the shade than in the sun, because it's nicer to snack in the shade. So we see that there are multiple effects, more ecological effects also in the entire ecological system of this shading, but the pollination is not one of them.
That's so funny. Yeah. What is projected for the future in terms of disseminating the knowledge of the technology to scientists, educators, and others in the Middle East and North Africa? You touched on it a little bit.
Sorry?
You touched on it a little bit.
The project that is in Yotvata, that is funded by the JNF, is actually, as I said, our faces to developing countries. We already had a first delegation to Kenya to actually look for a proper setting, a proper community that we can actually build a pilot like this and teach the community, especially to areas that has, again, no infrastructure of electricity and water. So this is the main idea for it to be. This is the first, it's a pilot, and then we can either build more, we can have the other delegations that can come and learn. Obviously, the Arava Institute and the Dead Sea Science Center would be happy to, and already had some delegations from foreign countries to come and to learn, and for us to cooperate with everyone that is interested. First of all, because we're scientists and science belongs to everyone, and because we meant to do good. And this is the way to do good.
Yeah, and there has been interest expressed, as you said. So there was this sort of
Yes, definitely.
Even in
And
southern.
the most, I think the greatest thing about it, it's really not that difficult to put panels, and right, it requires skills, it requires technical skills. We need to learn which kind of crops you want to grow, how much water, etc. But the main idea is quite easy to comprehend, and this is why it fits communities so well, to my opinion, because the complicated it gets, the harder it is to implement. And this is why we're trying to be as I would say, as simple as possible at the moment, so others can come and learn, and then you can start building more innovative solutions, more technology, etc.
You talked about the volume, and you showed us the different cases of the tomatoes and what grows better in shade and not shade. Did you talk about the taste? Did you the difference in the taste between? Yeah.
So at the first when I grew radish, I was very excited, and then I live in Keturah, which is where the Arava Institute is, and I brought 2 boxes to the grocery store, and I said to people, this is the shaded radish and the sunny radish, and please tell me if you found any differences in taste. And people said that the sunny radish was more spicier, and I think it's because it has less water in it, and this is why it's spicier. And we also did some testing with the tomatoes, but frankly, the species itself is quite disgusting. So either one of the plots were good. We did some sugar testing, but we saw no differences. But we'll continue to do it because it might be not important with tomatoes, but for example, with grapes, sugar content is important. If you do wine or you want, or to eat it, it's supposed to be sweet. So you need to know the effect of the shade, but the tomatoes weren't so much.
You need to try a different type of tomato.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
So here are a couple of questions from Beryl. One is about using tractors, if you use tractors for planting and harvesting. And then the other is Beryl asked about co-animal examples, if there are any co-animals.
Okay. Yes, definitely. So the pergola that you saw in Yotvata is actually almost 3 meters high, and this is because tractors are coming, are working in the field. So what we actually did is measuring the mechanical equipment in the farm, and this is how we decided on the height of the pergola. But obviously, what we did, so it depends on the mechanical equipment that you're using, and this is what counts the height, or this is how you decide what the height is. At the setting in the institute, we went grounded, in a grounded setting, because we're saying, okay, there are already fields that have grounded PV panels. Let's use it for livestock. Let's use it for communities that lives nearby and can actually plant. Like even I like a community garden, so they can already use, not now we're actually build an infrastructure on agricultural land. Let's do the same thing where there's also already grounded PV field that has no agriculture, and add agriculture to it. And this is for the other question, this is relevant because of grazing. There is no reason why animals cannot graze and rest in a grounded PV field. There is no reason. Right now, it has fences around, but to my opinion, it's more of an insurance issue, and it actually harms the ecological environment because this is an open land. So this will enable animals to graze. It will enable animals to cross. It would enable a lot of things. So yes, it's possible, definitely.
Great. So we have a question here about mulching. So you are not mulching.
I'm not sure I know what it means. Sorry.
It's with the soil. I don't have a good way to explain it. Okay. Well, we'll put that one aside. We'll put that one aside
Okay,
right now.
sorry, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
I
Where are
can
the
use
solar,
Google Translate.
yeah. Where are the solar panels that you're using manufactured?
I'm guessing China.
Yeah,
And
that's what
this is my
most of them are
assumption.
manufactured.
Yeah, we don't produce PV panels in Israel, unfortunately.
Yeah.
These ones are the simplest panels, the simplest panels. Actually, they're no transparent, no bifacial, just monocrystal panels. Yeah.
Are the same types of panels used, you know, in other areas of the world? You show some pictures where where agrivoltaics is being piloted. Do they use the same types of panels, or do they use different panels depending on the climate?
I think it depends pretty much on your intention and how much funding you have, because the more innovative you get, the more money you need. Transparent panels are something that you don't see it a lot. It's quite expensive. It's great technology, but it's quite innovative. So it depends again, what are you aiming for? And I said that we're aiming at the moment to make it as simple as possible. So
that's great. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so a bunch of people have translated mulching, hipui, or green fertilizer.
Okay. Hipui, okay. So no, we don't actually. We don't use that.
Why not? It's just not.
It's not a common agriculture technique, I assume, in this region, because you add fertilizer to the water. We use liquid fertilizers, and it's been added to the water in the irrigation system. So you drip fertilizer right to the crop, to the plant itself. So we don't use, maybe in other places, but not here.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
People are sharing a lot of feedback that it can help, it can keep water, it can hold water in the soil, it can be plastic. There are lots of
so if we're talking about plastic, so for some crops we use plastic, but we use it more for as a protection against pests, etc. So yes, they put plastic if it's for example, the corn at the beginning grew under plastic because we wanted to make sure that he has the best conditions. So if by that we mean mulch, then yes, some crops we do it, but it's not, it depends on the plant itself, the crop itself, not necessarily for everything.
Okay, great. Okay, so we are coming to the end of the hour, and usually we try to keep these somewhere around 45 minutes. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. This is what we love. I mean, this is why we're working with the Arava Institute, is to support this research and work and the impact it can have in the region and beyond. I want to thank you so much. We will be offering more of these. We'll have another session next month, and we'll have more information on that soon that you all will receive. I hope that you signed up for this, so hopefully that means everybody who's here is on our email list. You'll get more information, and so please keep a look in your email for that. And we look forward to seeing all of you soon. Some of you I know we might see in Israel on our bike ride, the Israel ride, in less than 2 months. And maybe you'll meet Tali there, who knows? She might be at the Institute during that time. And if there are additional questions which might be coming in, I see we'll shoot them over to Tali and get answers out to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Okay.